You are watching CCM Legacy Podcast. My name is Chris Gaines. I want to welcome you to today's episode. And my friend and co-host, Scott Gaulden. Scott, how are you doing today?
Hey, Chris, I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I'm doing really good. I'm excited about today's interview. Today, I've got an old friend that has agreed to join us here, Matt Hybarger. Matt has holds a dear place in my heart in all the work that we did back in the 80s, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But Matt,
he sounds like he saved your bacon a few times from the stories that you've told. So maybe you owe Matt a few things in this world.
I'm not saying
favors.
I'm not saying that that's what I'm paying off right now, but it's highly possible, and you could not be more correct. Matt saved my bacon more than once back in the day. Matt is a very, very talented guy. Not only did he help out on the production side with actually helping put on the shows and load in and load out and really management with the bands and whatnot. But Matt's a great performer. Matt can sing, and he has gone on and had a career of his own. And so we would use and abuse Matt many times, quite frankly, to help us. He would open a lot of the shows. And so over the years, he honed his chops. And so I take any and all credit for his career after we got together. But in all seriousness, I'm going to give you just a little bit about his bio. Since 1987, Matt Hybarger has performed with written songs and collaborated alongside such artists as Gary McSpadden, Steve Archer, Stephen Curtis Chapman, Michael English, Scott Kerpane, Sandy Patty, the Archers. The list goes on and on, including Eddie Rabbitt, Johnny Rodriguez, Dallas Home, the Katinas, Rob Frazier, Clay Cross. He went on to do a lot of recording as well. He also performed on stage. I kind of leave out his dramatic side. He actually performed. We had successful sold-out shows of Godspell the musical, where he played the lead, and had people coming from all over the state to see his performance of Christ, and it was fantastic. He's probably best known for When Life Gets Broken, his project, which yielded 3 top 10 singles featuring Russ Lee and Michael O'Brien. Never Alone, a duet with Kelly Huff, and his anthem that he's kind of known for is Run Into His Arms, which spent a grand total of 256 weeks on the inspirational chart. With that introduction, Matt, welcome to the show. Thanks for being here with us today.
Welcome, Matt.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys.
I
heard your first show. It was outstanding, man.
Thank you. We're blessed to have you. We're excited to have you and get to know you a little bit better. I know Chris knows you real well, but I'm excited to get to know you a little bit better. And like I said, we get a chance to kind of talk about some of the challenging parts of life, which I think that's something that a lot of your songs deal with. So I'm really excited about that topic. But
I have one question, guys. I'm sorry. One question. Who's up after me?
I don't know. We may just shut it down after this. Just shut it down after this.
Matt, why don't you start, if you don't mind? Tell us a little bit about yourself. What are some of the things that you used to do as a child that you can talk about?
Yeah, that the statute of limitations is passed.
Yeah.
I grew up in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and I was an all-star for the Devil. Even in my teen years, I was working security in bars I was still going to high school. I was a very good football player, basketball player, athlete, but I had a anger problem and got me in some trouble. Anyway, long story short, I ended up getting kicked out of Richland High School and Christian's alma mater, Fort Worth Christian.
Wow.
Place. Yeah, I got kicked out.
It takes a special person to do that. Yeah.
It does, especially when you're good at something. Yeah. Normally athletes get away with whatever, but my mom had said, son, you got 2 choices. There was a small Christian school that was in a church in Fort Worth that was pastored by Gary McSpadden, who everybody knows Gary McSpadden. He's the Elvis of Christian music, literally. And I remember sang with Elvis, And a friend of mine had gone there with her coworkers, and she said, you can go there or you can go to Marine Military Academy. To which I said, now the Christian school's got girls, right? And so anyway, that's where I ended up going. Long story short, that was God's plan. I got saved there. That's another whole long deal. Gary McSpadden, to this day, I still mention him. He's gone on to be with the Lord, but I still mention the fact that he was the traffic cop that God put as I was speeding on the highway to hell, throwing coins out the window on the express lane, just trying to get there. And God used Gary and turned my life around. Of course, he was my hero. He was my, he was the Fonz dude, and what a singer, and that's where I guess I first, wanted to feel like I wanted to maybe be a singer, but I wasn't much of a singer, according to my mom, who was a singer. Um, but you mentioned going into youth ministry when Chris was telling me a little bit about your past, and you just kind of volunteered. Well, was already doing that because I'd been called to youth ministry, but somebody had to sing in the youth services. I said, well, I can give it a shot. And I had a guy play guitar and I sang. And I tried to do more contemporary songs. And the pastor of the church I was at, it was a church that had been taken over by the denomination because it fallen under the membership. And there was a guy in there trying to get younger people. We had an older gentleman there who was going to sing, and he, big booming voice, but he'd forget sometimes and say, we need to pray for our boys overseas, except at the time there weren't any active battles going on. So he said, Matt, we got some young families coming in. Can you please help us out? I said, sure, I'll try. Didn't know the first thing about music, how to sing it. I taught myself to play piano. I taught myself to play drums. Wow. I taught myself to sing. I remember the first song I ever sang in church was Chris Christian's We Are an Offering. You know how I chose that song? You guys remember in the days when they had the cassette accompaniment tracks?
Right.
And Word had them, the silver ones. And it had the little bars that showed what the range was. It didn't have much range. So I chose that one.
Four notes. That's all I got to say.
And anyway, so I started doing that. And just, because I said yes to the Lord, I developed my chops. And of course, Footloose came along. And do you remember how I ever got involved in the first place, Chris?
I want you to share that story again, please.
So there was a guy named Gary Alexander, who we both know. And matter of fact, he's doing surfing music now. Did you know that?
Oh yeah. We're hoping to have him on the show. I really am. He was.
Oh yeah. He's got some stories, man.
Absolutely.
But Gary, I knew Gary. And I don't even remember how I knew him. A group called The Basics, I believe he was in. Anyway. And so we were, they did a Christian night at this Footloose teen club. That's why they made Footloose. It was a teen disco, right? But they had a Christian night. And they were going to start doing bands. And so they were going to build a stage. And so we went to an old haunted house in North Richland Hills. And we got the lumber that was used then to build the stage for the original Footloose. This was before Greg got involved or any of that stuff.
I thought I knew every story about that place, and I don't remember that story.
Yep.
Wow.
Yep. I had a pickup and I helped Gary with lumber.
You're the dude with the van. You're the dude with the van.
No, I had a pickup, not a van. Let's get this straight.
Sorry, sir. Continue.
No, but then later on, I met you guys. I started coming to Footloose some, and we had it was when it was in the North Richland Hills upstairs, and you were going to have Sheila Walsh.
Yeah, that Sheila Walsh husband, from network television. Yeah, that one. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Her husband was Norman Miller.
Yeah.
Notorious manager.
Yes.
And he demanded that Sheila had the security guard.
Oh, well, see, let me paint the picture too. You're not getting the full effect. Matt's like 6'5". At that time, he's 6'5", probably 275. I was
only 235 back then, 240.
Oh my! He kept getting. I don't know if you guys remember the power team, but it was like, hey, that guy's in the power team. He's like, well, not really, but he kind of. And I'm telling a little secret. Don't tell anybody else. But Matt had a little swim through professional wrestling. We'll have to ask about that later. But yeah, you got to understand, he's the guy that always gets picked as the security guard, not the talent that's going to go on stage to sing. But it really came in handy when he had hecklers. I'll just say that. We'll just leave it at that. So, continue.
And the best part of this is at the old place, you had the stage, and then there was, I guess, what used to be some sort of a storage closet next door that it turned into a green room. And it was literally 3 feet from the door of that closet to the stage. And Norman required that there was a bonded security guard, which I was at the time, to escort her. And so Greg says, can you help me out? Because it's going to cost me like $200. I said, yeah. So I stood there at the door. I knocked on the door. I walked in the 3 feet, took a stride, and helped her on the stage, and went back and stood there for a while and sat down. That was my first.
Probably the most money you ever made at Footloose too, but that's a whole nother story.
Well, I heard how much did those satin jackets cost? Because I did end up with one of those.
That's okay. We all get even. Everybody gets even. Sorry.
Greatness.
Well, and see, that's the whole thing. And then from there, I started doing stuff, and I'll never forget. Greg asked me, and you did too. I was doing singing. He said, "We got a band coming in. We had a guy we thought we had. Would you be willing to open for them?" And I'm thinking, okay, I was on my youth group, because I used to do youth camps. So I had all kinds of kids in the area and youth pastors under that could come out to the concert. I said, yeah, they'll come hear me sing. It'll be fun. Except I didn't have any songs. I was strictly a cover guy. And so I'm trying to figure out what songs to do. And the band was David and the Giants. And so my relationship with David Huff goes all the way back to 1987. And he's actually worked on me with some of my songs from my first album. And I did a duet with Kelly on the first top 10 song I ever had, which was really cool. But that's how it all got started. And man, y'all used me. And then you had, can you get a band together? And so let me call a friend of mine who's an actual musician, and we got a band put together. And then the band was called RU12.
Oh, yeah.
And so I had t-shirts made. I was working for a guy that there was a dude that did all this kind of screen printing, and they said, big deal, Garth. I've got friends in high places, because we rewrote the Friends with No Places song and did that, including smashing the guitars. I sold out of those suckers in one night.
Wow.
John Schlitt has one of them because he thought it was cool. And Greg used me all the time. Let's see, it was David and the Giants. I can't remember all of them. 5 concussions. Julie Miller, remember her?
I didn't until you said that. I do remember now. Yeah.
Billy Sprague,
Yeah.
remember
Oh,
him?
yeah, absolutely.
Let's see, who else? Bruce Carroll,
Well,
Terry Gibbs.
I mean, it's almost like how many
Rob
did
Frazier.
you not open for? I mean, you were like the Doc
Well-
Doc Severinsen. That's a bad reference.
I was. And dude, I loved it because I got to meet a lot of these guys, interact with them.
Yeah.
And then I was there just to help on the weekends too and stuff, and always get to hang out with the artists. But I don't think it can ever be repeated just because the sheer amount of volunteers that you had
Right.
that were willing to work hard
Right.
and do stuff. You know, you had the Joyces running that whole crew, and you had Melinda and that crew in the snack bar, and you had you and Greg behind the scenes, and it was a once in a lifetime thing. And I really think that, and then I ended up doing Godspell, which got a whole nother deal like that. And that was because of my Footloose connections, because Paul Smith was supposed to play Jesus. And so Greg calls me and goes, hey, have you ever done any theater? Well, my mom was an actress. Hey, you want to come audition for the show we're doing?
Well,
And I never could say no to anybody.
I joke about this, and I told Scott this when I first met him. I said we were kind of like the Little Rascals, and that's not doing justice to the quality of the people that came through. But as far as us, it was like, hey, we've got a stage, let's put on a show. And so,
Yeah.
almost like Forrest Gump, we're finding ourselves following, in these situations like history is happening in front of us. As we get Stephen Curtis Chapman to come in, and we get Morgan Carr, all these people start coming through. But I'm fascinated by your story. I'm fascinated by your perspective, what it did for you personally. You're starting to tell those stories of being exposed to these people and going from literally a non-musician, non-singer to a career. And those stories of watching the artists come through. And as this story progresses, I want you to share a little bit about what that did in you. And, your signature album and the message you now carry is a message of struggling and coming out the other end of some pretty tough stuff. So I love telling these stories, and I want to hear some of them if you've got some that you wanted to share. But I think what we really want to get into is what did you learn during that process? Did you all of a sudden feel like, hey, I went on this rocket ship and now I'm up on the stage, performing with these people? They're my peers now to a certain extent. And then where did that go after we rode that wave, and we all grew up and got married and had kids, and we left the whole Footloose ministry? What happened to Matt? What did you do? Where did you go from there?
Well, I never felt like that was my calling to be a contemporary Christian music star. Never did. Back in the day, I went back and pictured him, and it's like, man, I was a good looking guy back then. What happened? It's called age. nothing works you over like age. But I'll tell you, back in, is it maybe 88, 89, something like that. I'd gotten to know Stephen Curtis really well. And I used to have to go to the airport and pick him up. As a matter of fact, the one time I went and picked him up in Lisa's dad's Suburban to carry his stuff. And then I went to the lake, and Stephen's tracks and stuff were in there. So Greg had to get this car and drive 100 to get there. It's like, sorry, bro. You have space works. But I had met all these guys. I'd opened for a lot of them. Rich Mullins, twice y'all had me open for that guy. What a guy. Just a really quirky guy. But a good dude, really, really, really good guy. But I remember thinking, I had just started writing. That's the thing. Run to His Arms. I didn't write that song until 2009, but I had the beginnings of it way back then, because I actually one night I did a chorus of it on stage at Footloose with the bands. And I don't know when it was, just kind of the thing towards the end, we went and played a little bit of it. And then I ended up writing the song, all those years later. But I had some ideas for some songs, and David W. Huff approached me. He goes, brother, if you want to do an album, you should come out to Mississippi and stay with a couple of weeks, and we'll write you some songs and we'll get you an album. One of the 5 top Christian people I've ever met in my life is David Huff. Oh my gosh. Now, I wish I could say with all the people I met that I have all these great stories. It's a small number of people that I go, wow, follow me as I follow Christ. But the people I met like that are amazing.
Hey, Matt, let me ask you a question. I love making these analogies. Sometimes I'm way off base and my family just kind of rolls their eyes. But if I were to say David and the Giants, first of all, quality people. But if I were to say they were the Duck Dynasty of CCM music, would I be very far off?
Wow.
Am I going to get killed for that comment? But
probably.
Okay.
No beards.
No beards. But they were the anti-artists. They lived out in the backwoods, right, of Louisiana or wherever it was, Tennessee.
Mississippi.
That's right. I'm sorry. They were from Mississippi, and they had their own record label out there, and they did their own thing.
Giant Records.
And their own thing. That was one of the things that was so amazing about this whole Christian music evolution is at one point you had kind of the traditional, and that's why I love your perspective is you lived that life to a certain extent. At some point you went in there and were like, going to do the artist thing. And you have a story about that, trying to fit into that box. But the guys like David and the Giants, they were just a family that played together, and God gave them music, and they didn't have any pretension at all. They were like, well, brother, come on, let's get you an album, just like that. And they quite frankly, they were treated different than other artists, probably made fun of a little bit, maybe even taken advantage of, for all I know. I just know they were down-to-earth quality people, and the ministry that flowed from that was incredible.
Well, and you that's the keyword, ministry. That's all I ever cared about. It was an extension of my ministry to young people, was doing music. Danny Chambers was a friend of mine, a big influence in my life too. He did all that worship and stuff, and really showed me that, that there's a way to reach kids, and you use the music. It's just another vehicle. So I never had any aspirations. And when they said you could do that, and then Steven's like, and then Jeff Moore, yeah, brother, we could sing on with you too. We'll help you write some songs. So I've got guys that are at the top of the charts saying they'll help me. But it would take me going away and going for a month or something, moving to Mississippi and working with these guys in the studio every day. And I didn't do it. I chickened out, because it's one of those things to say, you ever run across guys, I could have played for you, but I hadn't hurt my knee, But when you get a chance to do it and you wonder, I never really felt that was my calling. It's always been about ministry. Music has always been an extension of what I did in my ministry.
Do you regret that?
I don't. And I'll tell you why, because once we did this album, when Life Gets Broken, it was supposed to be a church album, just a little 4 or 5 song thing, based on the sermon series I was doing called When Life Gets Broken. Because let's face it, it does. In the red letters, in this world, you will have many trials and sorrows, but be of good cheer, I've overcome the world. I've never seen that on t-shirts or coffee mugs, but it's a reality, and 2 Corinthians 1 tells us all about why we go through stuff, so we can feel his comfort, and then we can comfort others who are going through things. And so that's what all that was about. And so the whole concept was life gets broken, right? So when life gets broken, he's picking up the pieces of my life, the Archer song from the 70s. And why is he doing that? Because somebody cares. And his name is Jesus, the Michael O'Brien song. See, Michael O'Brien was a dear friend of mine. Steve Archer was my music pastor while I was pastoring a church in Bedford, which is where all this came from. So what should we do? We should run to his arms, which is that song I'd written. But why don't we? Because we see ourselves, as you said earlier, as too far gone, too broken. We've messed up. We're on that wheel of performance, and we don't see ourselves the way he does through his eyes of love, which is Steve's classic song. And so I talked to my friend Michael O'Brien. He goes, well, yeah, man, I'll help you do it. Cool. And I had some folks that gave a little bit of money, and then I got a tremendous discount on stuff, which, oh, wow, it was a blessing. But anyway, so I was able to go do 4 songs. And Michael says, well, EPs usually have 5 songs. You want to write one together? I said, yeah. And so he said, I've got this tune and this idea. It was called Eyes on You. And so he said, would you mind if I brought a friend of mine in? His name's Reggie Ham. Reggie, at that time, that's on The Time of My Life by David Cook, which was #1 on pop charts for like 14 weeks. They played the Olympic Games. That was on the radio. Oh, I can write one with Reggie. And yeah, that'd be okay. It was a great song. So we go do it. We get it done. Another friend of mine, Alan Asbury, and I and Steve, we're driving up to Nashville. We do this stuff. I'm struggling with my voice, and so I end up doing Run to His Arms. I don't end up singing anything else. And then I say, hey, man, shouldn't we maybe do a song called When Life Gets Broken? That was the inspiration there. Okay. And so we sat down and wrote the song. And I say sat down, we did it via emails. We didn't even Zoom like it's with email and phone calls and stuff like that. We wrote the song.
How long was that process? How long was that process, man?
About 2 weeks.
Oh, really? Just going back and forth over email? 2 weeks? Wow.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. It's like, no, I like it. Don't change that. No, don't change that. See, you got to remember, that's not me. Okay. To be this, I always defer, right? Well, I'm having a hard time singing. I have all these other songs. And then it just kind of goes from there. And we do a song called Calling You Jesus that I wrote with Michael and Clay Cross. And we had this song, This Is My Story, Blessed Assurance, which is kind of a reworking of the song Blessed Assurance. So I got the Katinas to sing. Russ Lee came in, sang the vocal with Michael on When Life Gets Broken. So everybody that I brought in was way better than me. And Chris was asking me one time, he says, how do you stay humble? You surround yourself. Remember that the only talent you have is what God gave you, and it's for his glory. And surround yourself with people a whole lot better than you. And then you can't get a big head,
Keeps you humble.
Yeah. Well, I'm just here to drive the bus, man.
Yeah.
And if I can tell people about Jesus, that's what this is all about.
Yeah,
so
let me interject there for just a second. Just from my time with you, though, you're modest when you share that because you were very, very gifted. And I think God continued to work with you in those areas. And those of us that struggle, there's people that are listening that struggle with, okay, why does that person get more gifts than me? Or I have all these gifts. Why am I not doing more with it? Or really just struggling with that whole thing. You have a unique perspective because you had to have kind of juggled through some of that of feeling like, well, I kind of see myself here, but where does Christ see me? And how did my peers see me? So I was very interested in that, your perspective of how did you not A, get the big head, or B, why did you not go into deep depression? Because you could have gone either way and you probably lived in both worlds.
I did get depressed. I'll be honest. We were recording that album. And let's be honest with you. Everybody's got flesh they deal with, right? And I was sitting there thinking, all right, we're about to do this album, going to the studio. I could be intimidating. Well, Michael had just had to have a surgery because he'd had a nodule on his vocal cord. So he was still kind of limited. Of course, when you're one of the best in the world and you're limited, you're still better than almost everybody else. Steve Allen, I can hang with these guys. I can hang. And then they went first and they blew it out of the park. It's so amazing what they did. And I get in there, I'm like, run. Oh, I went back to the hotel that night. I was so depressed, man. I said, am I not even going to get to sing my own song? Am I going to have somebody else do this one too, Lord? But why did you bring me here for this? And then I just felt this voice say, why are you doing this? I thought you said this was for me. So what difference does it make who sings it? Busted. Makes no difference at all. And so the next day, I'm still struggling. And the guy Kent Hooper, the engineer, goes, man, no, I like your voice. It's got character, dude. You don't sound like anybody else. I said, well, I don't. Because my whole career, all I've done is imitate everybody else. Imitate Russ Taff, imitate Jeff. I had a guy ask me one time, my son and I were doing a song of, we were doing a cover of a Creed song, Higher. And I got through there, I'm singing it. I'm thinking it's really good. He goes, hey, that's pretty good, Matt, but what does Matt sound like singing that song? I already know what the guy from Greece sounds like. That's what you're doing here. What do you sound like? I was like, well, maybe we shouldn't record it because I don't know. But when he said, I like your voice, it's got character. To me, I was like, okay, so like somebody they have a good personality or what? But then I realized I always
I get a lot of that. I get a lot of that. And bless your heart. I get a lot of bless your heart, but go ahead.
Bless your heart. What I would always tell people if they're struggling is like, why are you doing it? Check why you're doing it. Because if you want to get God's grace in your life and his mercies here every morning, and he's always giving grace, and his grace is sufficient, one of the things you can't get into is pride. And I would just encourage people, you can sing. Do you realize how many people can't? They just can't. They don't have that gift. You have a gift. Use it for the Lord. And then the people that he wants to hear it will hear it. I can't tell you this song, When Life Gets Broken. We wrote the song in 2008, 2023, October. I still get emails about it from people in other parts of the world hearing it for the first time.
Wow.
Out of a church of 50 people in Bedford, Texas.
Well, let me ask this, Matt, because one of the points you brought up a little while ago is the effect that music has in ministering to youth, and how, at least my thinking is at least the things that were coming out in the late 80s and 90s, maybe even into 2000, it sure seemed like they had a hook into the youth of that time. And it also seems like that's kind of gone away. Can you tell a little bit about what your experience is and what did you see? Because it just seems to me like, I know that when I was working with youth, it was the way that I reached them, was be able to share with them, here's some great music you can listen to. And it had an impact, it touched their heart. I didn't spend a whole lot of time talking about rights and wrongs. I was more concerned with, can Jesus touch your heart? If we could just get that message out, I think that's what really made a difference for a lot of the kids that I was ministering to. So I'm just curious, what was your experience along those lines?
Well, I was listening. That's why I watched y'all's show. I was listening to y'all talking to my buddy Rick Kua, and he talked about the progression into worship music from what it was. And I don't think there was anything natural, certainly not supernatural about it at all. I think it was driven totally by ratings, dollars, the 38-year-old soccer mom with 2 kids driving the whatever, that's who they all cater to. And I'll tell you why I believe this. Let me say this first. I wrote something down I would remember to say. I have a note here. I like what you guys are doing. I love what you're doing, because we were all privileged to either grow up with Jesus music or contemporary Christian music. Some of us got a little bit of both. Mm-hmm. And so we got to experience that. And most of these artists today, I've always said, this is the only medium that does not honor its predecessors, the pioneers. We just kick them to the curb. They're done. They're no good. I have, over the past few years, interacted and talked with most of my experiences I have when I look back on this come from Gary, Steve Archer, Bob and Jane Farrell, Scott Wesley Brown, Sandy Patty, Russ Tapp. I've heard their stories. And, these guys paid a price, especially in the 70s. Man, imagine the cost of printing 1,000 LPs and just one cover of art. It was 6 months salary, at your job. And then you're going, the church doesn't want you. You're trying to play coffee shops. You're really hoping there's no record labels behind you. There's no marketing machine behind you. And you're going and you're just out there and you're hoping that somehow you'll sell enough records. And maybe if you're lucky enough to have t-shirts, whatever, to get to the next stop. And I don't know, man, today it's so different. And the fact that you guys are pointing people back to this legacy, I hate the fact that I had somebody hit me up the other day, Matt, have you ever written any songs that help people when they're suffering from poor body image or self-image? And so I'm trying to point them around to that, because I remember when we were talking about that stuff. And as a youth minister, any kind of minister, people are struggling and they're going through hard times. They have questions. Everything's not Pollyanna Christianity, I think is what I called it. Mm-hmm. It's not like that. There's a real story. And that's what I really believe is important about what you guys are doing. For me, it's the same thing. I want to tell stories and I want to talk about things. One of my songs says, my song, You Are Here. when faith is hard to find and mistakes, they haunt my mind. When the road ahead is blind, you're here. When there seems to be no way at the end of every day, I can't find the strength to pray. You're here. Through the flood, through the fire, everything this life requires and all that I desire, you're here. When the tears fall like rain and I can't see past the pain, your faithfulness remains. You're here right now in the midst of my doubt. What's fun to talk about that anymore? And even the worship stuff doesn't talk about that. The worship stuff talking about me. I'm brave. I'm strong. I'm this. I mean, I don't get it, but I know that's what they like to hear.
Right.
That's what their test audience is wanting to hear. And I think that's where we've gone. Anyway, that's my little diatribe.
Well, and I'd like to continue along that road for just a moment, because I do believe faith comes when we struggle. There is the phrase that somebody told me, there's blessing in the wrestling, meaning, it's when we're really struggling with God. It's really when we're struggling and our faith is challenged that we grow. I always like to tell people about my uncle that used to tell war stories. And it wasn't until late in life that I began to understand that in order to tell war stories, what do you have to do? You have to go through war. You have to go through and if as Christians, we're going to be able to tell a testimony that really has an impact, we're probably going to have to go through some tough things in order to do that. I'm curious, what are some things in life that have had that kind of impact on you? Where do you see that you've maybe been in the struggles? Where do the lyrics come from?
Well, the lyrics come from, a childhood of abuse. They come from, from raising myself and being an adult at 15 years old, doing things and whatever. It comes from.
Hey, here's free-range parenting. I'm a big fan of free-range parenting. I had the same thing. So,
Free range. I like that, free range parenting. That's good.
Years old, I'll figure it out, right?
But Romans 5 makes it pretty clear that we call ourselves overcomers. Well, what do we overcome? Well, the line was too long at Starbucks today, and I really had to overcome that. I just don't see how that compares to the Apostle Paul. In 2 Corinthians 1, that part I mentioned earlier, we used to comfort people. It says we go through these things, we experience God's comfort, so we can share that comfort. He goes on to say, we don't want you to be ignorant of what happened to us in Asia. He goes on to say all the terrible things that happened, so horrible that we despaired of life itself. So the great Apostle Paul, the super faith guy, was like, man, I gave up. He said, and then we realized we had to trust in the God who raises the dead, because we may end up that way. So we better trust him. And I think about Job. Though he slay me, yet will I trust him. The Lord gives, the Lord takes away. Blessed be his name. His theology was kind of whatever, but he didn't have the New Testament. He didn't understand, anything about grace and all that kind of stuff, how God's favor was on us. And we have that through Christ. The 3 Hebrew children. He's able to deliver us, but if he doesn't, he'll serve you.
I love that. So that's a great passage. Even if he doesn't, faith is what I like to call it, Well,
I think that's what we need these last days.
Yeah.
We better have that, God can, but if he doesn't, it doesn't matter. I don't serve Jesus because of all the good stuff I get. I get all kinds of good stuff because I serve Jesus. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And so even if I go through a tough time, I still got Jesus. When I'm looking forward to eternity, I still got Jesus. And that's what gets us through the hard times. And I didn't know that stuff. And then when I heard it, I couldn't let go. And it was a real quick process between me getting saved, me going to a youth camp and getting called into ministry at that thing. It was really it was profound. And it changed my life, and it changed me. And I wish I could say that I was always perfect from then on, but as Chris knows, that wasn't true. But I don't know, man. I'll tell you what I learned from these guys is they're out there on the road. And what we need to remember is we need to pray for people. Stop judging them. Stop sitting back and, what people, well, I think this and I think that. Oh, Proverbs 6. Look at yourself in the mirror. That haughty spirit, those high eyes and stuff like that. God hates that stuff. You need to stop that. The songs are born out of what we go through. Your experience, the quality of your walk with Christ is born out of what you go through. Overcoming means if you're an overcomer, you overcame something. We still got a battle. There's a reason God gave you armor and not dress blues and formal wear, So that's how I see it.
Wow.
So Matt, this stuff is just so meaningful to my heart. I know it's got to be meaningful to those that are listening, because Scott and I've talked a lot about the kind of the golden years of Christian music, and we had some highs, some mountaintop experiences that help fuel some of that. That helps get you through some of that. One of the things that we want to do with this podcast is to give a platform for artists like yourself to not only share what you're doing now, but talk a little bit about, as you're at this point in life, and you kind of heard from the Coor interview, he's all about what is it you're going to be known for, and so that legacy part of things. Talk to us just a little bit about, what your family walk has been like. What have you learned as being a husband and a dad, and eventually grandparents and all that stuff? What is it that when they look back on your time, and our hope is that somebody may pop this into a AI headset and watch this interview again. What are they going to remember about Granddad or Poppy that they might not have known?
You have things you'd like to see them do. My thing for my kids is I want them to know Jesus. My grandkids, I want them to be happy in this life because they're walking with the Lord. And I want them to share that faith with their friends because I don't believe there's a whole lot of time left on this earth. And so we need to make the most of it. And that's what I'm trying to do. And so every time I get a chance to go somewhere and share, can I tell you something real quick? I went to a Presbyterian church a few months ago. And, I'm singing hymns and stuff because I've recorded some hymns. I did a cover of I Had Decided to Follow Jesus. That was the last thing I had. It was on the charts. It was amazing. It's a wonderful song, great production, tremendous background vocals. The Azadors I told you about from the Philippines, but they let me have the track and use it here in the U.S. and it's a beautiful thing. But I was singing these hymns and the hymns I got from Gary, from the Gaithers. And then I started talking to these people and I said, and the pastor, you can tell it was a God thing because she gave me the platform. It's not normally how they do their service, very traditional. And farming community and stuff like that. I said, I just feel like God wants to do some healing here today. Some healing in some of your hearts. I get a sense that there's some people here that in your family, you got some strife. And that's what, there's nothing more important than forgiveness. And I pulled out a Don Henley song called The Heart of the Matter.
Oh, yeah.
And I did the Don Henley song. Everyone wants me to sing Desperado. Because that was never even recorded on purpose. A buddy of mine took the audio from one of my services, put it on another deal and put it out there. They played it on Christian country radio. I thought it was hilarious. So people still want me to sing Desperado. I said, well, I'm not singing Desperado, but I will sing one for you like that. And I did that Heart of the Matter. And dude, the Holy Spirit went through that and people were just like weeping. I said, I know this is unusual for you. How many of you guys, you really need forgiveness in your life? You really need to forgive somebody. And I talked about how, if you want God to forgive you, you got to forgive. And I talked about the fact that some of you who've been abused here, I said, the Lord wants you to know, he wants you to be free. But as long as you look back and you keep that there, you're shackling yourself to everything that happened to you. And man, people came down. And then I said, it seems like some of y'all, maybe you don't know Jesus like that. You don't know, maybe you come to church, but you really don't know him as your Lord. And you can know him every day like that. How many like to know that? And these hands went up in a Presbyterian church, dude. 16 people got saved in a Presbyterian church. I've been going to that church for years. And I thought, I just laughing, going, because I'll go anywhere. I don't care.
Yeah.
I have no expectations. I just want to share the gospel. And God used a secular song because it spoke to an issue. And I think that's what we need to be doing with our music today.
Speaking of that, would you mind sharing just a little bit about kind of what your life was like? We've talked about the early days. We talked about, doing the recording and going and meeting all these amazing people. Is it safe to say that you met your love of your life and you've been married for 50 years and it's been bliss and you've got all these kids and everything's perfect and you're a wealthy, happy, quote unquote, successful Christian?
It has been quite a journey, man. I was pastoring a church and doing everything I thought I could do for the Lord, and I was busy doing his work. And my wife decided she won't be married to me anymore. That was it. 19 years in, bam, done. And I thought to myself, how did I miss that? And part of it's like, Lord, I've been doing all this for you. And he's like, have you? Because if you're doing it for me, you wouldn't have missed all. I mean, it's not really. I was doing it in my own power. I was some of us, we have this Christian, we've been doing it for so long that we can say all the right things and look the right way and do the right things and have the skins on the wall. But we've forgotten to plug back into the real power source. And we're running on fumes and we're running on empty. And when that happens, the devil comes in and he divides and destroys. And so I went through a divorce and, I stepped down from my church and I sat there and thought, well, I'm done. And then I had some people that, should have known better that were slandering me. Friends of mine, guys I'd worked with in the past. And so I was really, really discouraged. And one day my pastor, Gary McSpadden, I was talking to him and he says, Matt, I kept up with him and I had some new songs I was working on. And he goes, Matt, the gifts and calling of God are without repentance. There's a reason God's burst new songs in your heart. If he was ready for you to quit and give up, he'd have taken you to, taking you home. But you've got a message. You've got a way of reaching people that you need to share. I was like, well, I don't want to. It's just, when is this about what you want to do? It's never been about what you want to do. And so I said, all right. So I was looking for somebody to collaborate with, and Scott Crepane, buddy of mine, knew him well and said, so I reached out to him, would you be willing? I told him my story. He goes, oh, I'd love to work with you, man. And so we wrote You're Here, a song called I Turn to You that is fairly controversial if you listen to the lyrics. And then Scott, I wrote The Purpose in the Pain, and Scott just threw the background vocals down on it just because I wrote those stuff. And that song, that has been, to this day, again, these songs were done 5 years after When Life Gets Broken, because I took all that time off. I just said, look, I'm done. I don't want to do anything. I don't want to be around this stuff anymore. I just want to be a Christian and go to heaven when I die. That's really all I wanted to do at that point. And Gary said, you can't do that. There's God didn't call you to quit.
Okay.
He
doesn't allow coasting, does he? God doesn't allow you to coast. Yeah.
No, he doesn't.
Coasting. No.
I used to tell kids, walking with the Lord is like walking up or down escalator. You can't ever stop, because if you do, you end up right back at the bottom, man. Let's face it, we've all done that at the mall. But then I had some health issues and some different stuff like that. I was battling. Like every time I turn around, it's like I'm battling something. And I got people saying, well, if you just had enough faith, that wouldn't happen. And I'm thinking, well, there's a whole bunch of folks in the Bible that would disagree with you. They're the heroes in the Hall of Faith. Apparently they didn't have enough faith.
Right.
And then I realized something. As long as God has me here and I'm upright, I'm going to keep on walking with Jesus. And I'm seeing more and more opportunities, and God's giving me some more new songs that kind of fall into the same thing. I've got one I'm working on now called You're My Deliverer. It's just Psalm 46, it's just based on all that stuff there. And a lot of new stuff I'm working on right now. And I want to get out and share it, man, because I love the chance to talk to people one-on-one and in a group, and then afterwards.
Well, I also think it's a message that the world needs today more than anything else. Those that don't have Christ, they need to know that they need to know that there's meaning in their suffering and the pain that they're going through if they'll commit their lives to Him. Because I see a lot of people in this world that are suffering and hurting, and they see absolutely no purpose in it whatsoever. And to me, it's like Christ comes along and says, I'm gonna provide some meaning for it. I might not take it away, but I'll provide some meaning for it. I'll provide some understanding for it. I'll give you a reason to embrace it and to use it to serve something beyond yourself.
Hebrews tells us, Hebrews 5 says that Christ, though he were a son, he learned obedience to the things he suffered.
Yeah.
Jesus suffered.
Yeah.
We're called to share in his sufferings. I'm not sure where these preachers on TV escape their sweatless victory stuff. Man, I'm sweating every day. but I tell you what, I'm sweating so that I can gain crowds, that I can one day lay at the feet of my Savior, It's just say, well, yeah, skated in here on sweatless victory. Where's my place?
Right.
All three of us were very passionate about youth at that time in our lives. And so now as I look at it as a grandfather, and I think about my kids as adults and them being, parents themselves, Matt, like you said, I can't tell you how many people would come up to me and go, man, I wish there was still a place like that you guys did back in the 80s for my kids.
Yeah.
I grew up going there, and now there's not that for my kids. And I'm flattered by it, but immediately, my flesh, I'm reminded of the role that I may or may not have carried very well to my kids. And that is allowing them to suffer a little bit, allowing them to wrestle maybe more wrestle with their faith and be there for them more. And so if there is kind of a regret, I want to be honest with those that are listening and my kids and my grandkids that, I didn't have it all together, and I could have done a better job of saying, you're gonna, in this world, you will face struggles of many kind, and that's just part of the drill. And so did I go around maybe putting a little too much bubble wrap at times? Did I protect them? Maybe I did, maybe wanting them to be in this bubble a little bit. And so I want to raise my hand and say, that wasn't good. I want to, it came from a place of love, but being real to them and not being so high and mighty that I had all the answers, and to be able to share that with the next generation is one of the things, that authenticity to say, I still screw up, I still struggle, and I don't have all the answers, but I believe I do know who does, and let's talk about it. And so I think we've had a whole generation where we didn't do that. And so now I feel like there is very little, come let us reason together. There is, let's go have coffee, and my job is not to convince you that I'm right and that you're wearing the right jersey. You know what I'm saying? Let me listen to you. Let me listen to where you are, because first of all, it's not about me. And second of all, the guy that does, he can handle it. He can pretty much handle it.
Yes.
So,
yeah. Oh yeah. Well, let me just kind of tie this off with this, in Romans chapter 5, we were going through this when I preached a couple of weeks ago. I got a chance to preach on Sunday morning, which doesn't happen often, so I really enjoy that. And then I make Pastor sweat. He's like, "Oh, what's Matt going to do? What's Matt going to say?" But I was talking about tribulation and hope, boasting in the Lord, basically. In Romans 5, where Paul says, we rejoice in hope. And knowing that. So this is the thing. Knowing that tribulation produces perseverance, character, hope. Remember, knowing that God causes all things to work together for the good of those who love it. We have to know that. And you don't know it here, you know it here. This is your knower. If you just have it here, it's never going to translate. But when you're going through it, oh man, it's a beating. But again, that's why you have armor. And Paul said this at the end of that whole thing. He says, "Don't let anybody trouble me, for I bear in my body the marks of the Lord Jesus Christ." I'm happy to say that if I had bags under my eyes or wrinkles or whatever, I bear in my body the marks of the Lord Jesus. It don't compare to what Paul bore, but it's a sign. It's a sign to me. Every time I think of something I'm dealing with, it's like, well, God got me through another day. The doctors don't know how I'm standing, but I am, and I'm going forward and I'm working and I've got music going and I'm sharing with people and I'm loving them and I'm telling them about Jesus. And as long as I am drawing breath, man, I'm going to keep going forward. And devil, you can't stop me. Just don't give up. That's what that whole thing's about. Do not grow weary. But we all do, don't we? And that's why there's so many verses in the Bible about it.
Absolutely.
So that's what brothers are for. That's what shows like this are for, is to help people, encourage people. Man, keep your head up.
I'm so encouraged. I feel like this is something that's missing a lot in Christianity today, is the idea that we need to talk about what it's like to struggle and be real with people. And when we set people's expectations that, when you take on Christ, all your problems are solved and he's going to be there to take care of everything. We set the expectations up here and the reality is down here. And that creates place for the devil to play in. And we've got to be more realistic with people. And we've got to tell them, look, you're going to have struggles, and your music inspires people to handle that, and I really appreciate that approach, because I think we have to be realistic with people. They're going to have struggles. And the sooner we realize that, the sooner we start building that strength and wrestling with God and those kind of things, the better off we're going to be. So I just really appreciate the way that you've encouraged all of us today.
We all go through stuff. You get dinged once in a while, but guess what? You're still standing.
Absolutely.
I'm still standing. And we should do that. And then we should encourage one another, and help them. You see a brother struggling, man, don't say, "Well, why are you struggling for?" Man, go put your arm around him. Y'all get going together.
Yeah.
And that's my goal. That's what I want to do.
Matt, buddy, I love you so much. You know that if I haven't told you that more. The other thing about this whole podcast is, from a personal standpoint, is getting back to friends and a time in life where it was really special. And so if I didn't tell you enough then, I want to tell you now how much I love you and I appreciate you and what you've meant to me and my family. How can people learn more about you? Can they hear your music? Where would you like them to go to look you up and follow up a little bit more about what you're doing?
Amazingly enough, you can find it anywhere. I'm always shocked by where you can find my music. You said I had a YouTube channel. So I do. Cool. That's awesome, man. You get the website.
Most people want to go. Their whole thing in life is to hear themselves on the radio. Matt wants to be in the bargain bin at Walmart. That's really what he's going for.
I do. Well,
Means
let me tell you
it.
a funny story though about this is another way that you stay humble. So if you're gonna look for my music, MattHybarger.com. I mean, I've got my pastor does that for me just because they have a goodness of his heart. I haven't updated that thing in 3 years, I don't think. I think it still says I have 20 years of music, but I've been doing it for 37. But anyway, you can go to Reverb Nation and then look at Matt Hybarger there. I'm on Spotify. I'm on all of them. But here's the funny thing. I'll say, Alexa, play music by Matt Hybarger. And she'll say, play music by Matt Hybarger. Hybarger is my name.
Okay, all right.
Hybarger. So anyway, yeah, but you can find it anywhere. I've got some new stuff coming out. I got new Christmas stuff out this year. Check out my Christmas song, Hope in the Middle of the Night. It came out late last year with the Azadors. Those guys are amazing.
Great. How about live? Can we see live anywhere? Are there any things going on that coming up that we could see you?
Well, you can bring me into your church or your business or your whatever coffee house.
I'm having a
email me at highbargerbb@gmail.com. I'm actually going to be October 29th. I'm going to be at Christian Faith Fellowship in Ponder, Texas at 6 p.m. And it's going to be pretty wild because I'm going to be actually doing a youth type service for everyone. And including all the stuff you may remember from youth, all the crazy games and stuff. Yeah, it's going to be over the top. I have some really cool over the top rocking music. While I still can, I'm going to keep rocking. And then Chris and I are going to do Watching the Devil Have All the Good Music.
Yes.
And some more Jeff Moore tunes in the very near future.
Absolutely.
Right.
I got to be honest. We've gone through the whole show, and this whole thing has been a ruse because, Matt, I just need you this Friday night to open. We got Billy and Sarah Gaines, and I don't have anybody to open for them. And I need
Sarah Gaines. I forgot about them.
I need you to do that again because I know you'll always come through. In fact, Matt would always have in whatever genre he had to adapt. I mean, whatever we were doing R&B or we were doing rock or whatever it was, Matt always came through.
I remember Billy and Sarah Gaines.
Great
popping
people.
out the Andre Crouch stuff.
Great.
Hey, let me tell you something. I do that to this day. I'll go into a church, and if I see a bunch of gray hairs, I'm going, okay, I can do this song and this song. Pull out the Gary McSpadden Gaither set.
That's right.
And because he lives, I can face tomorrow. And then I'm standing rock solid, no moving me.
I love it. Let's do this. Let's have another recording where we do it live, and we'll let people just throw out things, and you just have to on the fly just do your impersonation. We'll do Wheel of Impersonations.
As long as I don't have to play them. Okay, I can do that. I do 3.
Okay.
I love it. Matt, thanks again for your time, buddy. You're the best.
You bet.
Bye now.
Appreciate you guys.